In Ozark, where the wind often flutes through ancient pines and the fog roams across the ridges in quiet processions, it is said that some secrets are older than the forest itself. There is a stillness before dawn here, a hush broken only by the occasional bay of hounds or the distant booming of creek water rolling over stone, where even the birds seem reluctant to chirp before the sun is high and strong. By 1903, these backwoods carried stories older than the white paint on the little clapboard schoolhouse, older than the Cherokee themselves, stories about the moon-eyed people, whose name was spoken only when evening had banished the day's hard honesty. Few believed in them now, not openly. But there was a time, so the old men muttered at the general store's pot-bellied stove, when the woods belonged to others, pale people with eyes like lanterns caught in low fog, who built forts of unmortared stones and shunned the sun. Their legends flickered, half-remembered in the minds of the local children, and the names of their vanished forts and shadowed mounds persisted on yellowing maps. Most folk called it just a story, something to scare away the city surveyors or send the youngsters early to bed. But in every myth lies an ember of truth, and sometimes a gust of fate fans it bright again. That year's spring was colder than usual, dragging with it an anxious edge, as if unseen things waited just out of sight. Timbermen came and went, axes bright as the promises of railroad barons, and the forest seemed to shrink with every passing month. Sentinel boulders rose from the leaf mold, half swallowed by moss, marking places where even the bravest hunters went silent. It was there in a deep pocket of pines that old Jonah Larrabee, town eccentric and self-appointed antiquarian, claimed at last to have proof. Jonah was a limping, wiry man with brown eyes too sharp for comfort and a collection of local lore scribbled in dozens of rag-bound notebooks. "Ain't just stories, not all of them," he'd say to anyone who'd listen, jabbing a knuckle at the ground for emphasis. "Ask White Owl if you don't believe me." His grandma carried the tale in her pipe smoke. He claimed to have mapped every stonework mound, every ruined circle, and could recite their positions by heart. Yet even he had never seen what he now found, half buried at the edge of an abandoned clearing, a shape so still and ravaged by the elements that, for a breathless moment, he mistook it for a trick of the dawn. She was small, barely more than a child, limbs coated with grime, a wildness about her, like she belonged more to the wind and leaf litter than to flesh and blood. Pale not just by birth but by living months or years away from sunlight. Her hair lay tangled, streaked with the copper of dried mud. Most uncanny were her eyes. Oversized, not blue nor gray nor any earthly color, but shining, milky, almost opaline, reflecting the treetops and the sickle moon hovering overhead. She winced and shielded her face as Jonah approached, flinching at the dull light seeping through the trees. What clothing remained to her was odd, a patchwork of old muslin, perhaps scavenged from settler discards, fastened with bone and twine and adorned with tokens of stone and feather. She clutched a single smooth stone, oval and pale as a moth, in one delicate hand. She did not speak or even cry. When Jonah whispered, "Who are you, little one?" she only pressed the stone to her lips and blinked those luminous, lidless eyes. Jonah, as much for the chill running up his own spine as out of charity, wrapped the girl in his weathered coat and staggered toward town. Word spread before he ever crossed the last fence. Wild child, feral waif, ghost, changeling, each name passing from mouth to mouth until it fetched up at the tidy house of Sarah Hobbs, the new schoolteacher, and at the porch of White Owl, the last full-blood Cherokee elder left in these hills. Sarah Hobbs had come from St. Louis, claiming a science degree and a determination to drag the Ozarks, at least her corner of them, into the 20th century. She was a practical woman, immune to backwoods superstition, or so she told herself. She saw the child's fragile body and unordered hair, but her mind catalogued symptoms: undernourished, some sort of photophobia, perhaps a rare albino. The eyes disturbed her most. "Animals seen in torchlight," she muttered, examining the glassy stare. She gently ran her thumb over the girl's palm. There, unmistakable signs of careful use. as if she'd spent years burrowing in stone and soil rather than playing with dolls. The girl recoiled from the lantern, both at the brightness and with a whimper pitched so high Sarah almost missed it. She soothed her, water, warm broth, flannel for the chill, and quietly noted the absence of any dialect or tongue. Gently, she tried every language she knew. English, a little French, a few Cherokee phrases passed from White Owl's visits to the school. The child would not reply, but her fingers closed again and again on that moonstone, as if drawing strength from its cold heart. Meanwhile, Jonah, vindicated and anxious in equal measure, sought White Owl. The old man's cabin was heavy with the ghost of pipe smoke and the sharp tang of wild sage. "It's them, the moon-eyed," Jonah insisted, eyes darting. "She's one left behind, survived in shadow." "Just like the stories, White Owl. You must recall." White Owl, his hair long and silver, shook his head with a gravity that made Jonah shudder. "Maybe true, maybe not. The old ones said their blood was a curse, could not bear the day, only walk in song and dream. Our grandmothers told of the war, the river moon bright with their tears as they fled. My own mother used to say, if you find a child who hates the sun, you bury your secrets and keep your doors locked, for night is not always your friend." This story, these tensions, began to spread. Some townsfolk muttered the sheriff should be called. Others whispered that disquiet followed from meddling in what should remain lost. But Sarah insisted the law be informed and the girl's health protected, convincing the sheriff's wife as a matter of pure Christian charity. Sheriff Amos Price, a bear of a man with more sympathy for livestock than for legends, arrived as the lantern burned low. He grimaced at the feral child, but dutifully opened his logbook. "Found near the big stone circle, again? We never did confirm who built those." "You think she's one of ours?" His tone made ours mean both human and white. He exchanged uneasy glances with White Owl, the schoolmom's diagnosis. Clashed against old man Laraby's, Folklore and White Owl's ancestral caution. The girl, meanwhile, sickened in the brightening dawn and fell into an uneasy sleep, murmuring senseless syllables, her hands clutching at invisible shapes, her feet twitching beneath the borrowed sheets, bird tracks trailing toward the forest, the lantern guttering as wisps of mist curled over the windowsill. By midday, the townsfolk's curiosity had become nervousness. The sheriff posted a deputy to keep watch at the schoolhouse, while Sarah sat at the child's side, reading by window light pressed through a sheet to lessen the glare. On the table, the moon-shaped stone pulsed faint warmth, and outside a few of the braver children dared each other. You wouldn't last a minute staring at her. My cousin saw her eyes. Gave him nightmares. As dusk fell, an unnatural wind stirred the woods. Later, Sarah would recall the moment she sighed and let herself doze, exhausted beside the silent girl. Only the sheriff's deputy heard the next clatter, the breaking of locks, a sharp animal yelp. He tore open the door to find the sickbed empty, footprints like delicate bird tracks trailing toward the forest, the lantern guttering as wisps of mist curled over the windowsill. All that remained on the girl's bedding was the strange moonstone, and beneath it, pressed into the fabric, a single drop of dried blood, black in the dying lamplight, shining like a tiny, permanent eclipse. In the hours that followed, the townsfolk gathered anew. Jonah swore the legends had awakened for a reason. White Owl locked his cabin and sent a warning. If you see anything pale with hands too long, shut your eyes until dawn. Sarah, shaken and uncertain, pocketed the stone and wondered what sort of child could vanish so swiftly, leaving behind only fear and riddles, and whether the ancient legends were prophecy, warning, or curse. Somewhere, beyond the reach of kerosene and catechism, the forest grew quiet. Mist rolled down the ridges, and under the full moon's cold gaze, wide eyes blinked awake, eyes unblinded by the dark. Memories older than words, bearing the secret of the moon-eyed lineage, waiting patient and silent amongst the stones. The morning after the girl vanished, the whole of Pine Hollow and its outlying farms was alive with nervous speculation. Even the crows seemed subdued, Jonah, unable to sleep, wandered the village square, desperate for any sign. Was this, finally, evidence that the tale was not just half-remembered dread? At the edge of the woods, muddy footprints, small, impossibly long, each toe splayed wide, led away from the schoolhouse and circled one of the old stonework mounds before dissolving into dew and dead leaves. Word spread. The pale girl was gone. Some said she'd simply slipped away as wild children do. But half the town locked their doors anyway, and others tacked up branches of mountain ash for luck. White Owl remained serenely troubled, sitting outside his cabin, pipe unlit, staring south toward the oldest mound. "Storm coming," he said to Sarah Hobbs, who'd come seeking wisdom as much as comfort. "Storm from the past." Meanwhile, new rumors tickled the logging camp upriver. During the night, one of the timber poachers, an outsider, barely a name among locals, had vanished after boasting about getting into one of them old Indian caves. His partner, eyes hollow from a sleepless night, babbled to the sheriff. He said there was something down there, something watching him through cracks in the rock. "I just know he's dead." Or worse, Sheriff Price, never keen on legends but mindful of panic, organized a search. He pressed White Owl for stories and Jonah for his ragged maps. Neither wanted to guide a party into cursed ground, but duty or curiosity overcame sense. By noon, the searchers pushed through vines to the perimeter of Blind Fort and the ruins they called the West Mound. A tangle of stacked stones and unnatural darkness. Inside the perimeter, the moss held strange shapes that might once have been carvings. Jonah ran gloved fingers over lichen-choked depressions. "See these?" he murmured. "They match what the old stories said about the Moon-Eyed clan. Eyes big as grapefruits. That's what the Cherokee said." White Owl stayed silent, but his mouth grew tight. Further in, the group found a cold air venting from a fissure, faint but steady, like the breath of some underground beast. It stank of minerals and older rot, drawing the men's lantern light into pools of shadow. "We go in?" a deputy asked, voice uncertain. Sheriff nodded and three went, leaving White Owl and two others by the entrance. The chamber they found was low and close, the walls stacked in careless, ancient order, dusted with years. There were bones, small, brittle, possibly animal, but here and there a shape too long, too narrow. Most chilling were marks cut into the stone, rows of circles, each gouged by a wide hand or crude blade, some filled with flakes of glinting mica. Above the largest circle, a simple carving, two great rounded eyes. Sarah Hobbs, back at the schoolhouse, was not idle. Haunted by the child's vanishing but unable to dismiss her scientific ideals, she pored over notebooks, county registers, and any record left by parents, trappers, bounty hunters. A decade earlier, there'd been a rash of missing livestock, the odd tale of a sun-blind babe found and lost again. And always, the reports clustered near the ruins, the stonework, the caves. She was interrupted mid-search by a young boy, Billy Reeves, the knobby-kneed son of a local farmer, who burst in, face ghost-pale. "Miss Hobbs, come quick!" Out of breath, he beckoned her through twisting paths to a spot near a half-collapsed mound. There, on an exposed slab, reddish-brown traces, bloody, unmistakable, formed a smeared, child-sized handprint. Next to it, a crescent-shaped stone, smaller but cut from the same pale rock as the one Iris had clung to. The stone shimmered strangely, as if slicked with oil, and seemed faintly warm. Sarah gathered the stone, examining it as she would something radioactive. "No animal did that," she muttered, more to herself than to Billy. "And it's not the girl's wound. This is deliberate." An overhanging branch was lashed with bits of old cloth, tufts of fur. Strange talismans perhaps left as warnings or invitations. That night, the wind shifted and rose. The loggers, most of them strangers, drank deeper than usual and spoke little. Local children swore they saw bright eyes, pairs of them, peering from gulches and windbreaks, but were shushed and scolded for telling big ones. Dogs cowered in barns. Cows moaned at midnight. A local woman, coming back late from a birthing, claimed she'd seen three figures, pale and naked, slip off the road and vanish among stones. Jonah Larrabee, unable to sleep and sharp with dread, walked the borders of his own tiny farm. Through bleary eyes he saw, or thought he saw, shapes, too quick, too silent, skirting the new moon's faint silver. "They're watching us now," he muttered. "Maybe they always were." At dawn, the sheriff arrived again at Sarah's schoolhouse, having spent a sleepless night logging the second poacher's disappearance. "We lost another," he said, voice hoarse. "Just found his boot and a hat. No sign of him after he tried probing the west mound. I don't like it." "Not at all." Sarah, holding the warm crescent stone and thinking of the bloody handprint, nodded. "It isn't animals. The stories, they're not just stories, Amos." She hesitated. "If you believe in curses, you ought to close those mounds. If you don't, figure out who's making children vanish." Meanwhile, White Owl organized a watch among the Cherokee families on the edge of town. He told them, quietly but firmly, "Make no more talk of the moon-eyed. Bury your mirrors, cover your children's eyes, and do not wander by moonlight until the old anger passes." But tales spread nonetheless, passed in whispers from stoop to store to church pew. Some recalled a great-grandparent warning, "Some things vanish, but not forever. They linger, hungry for old ground, for old blood." There was something else the sheriff did not want to tell the town. In his records, the first settler of this land, his own great-uncle, had vanished after a drunken boast of finding gold under the tomb mound. The official story, all these years, was that he'd gone to Kansas for work. But no one believed that. Not really, as news of unexplained vanishings, bloody handprints and eerie stones spread, townsfolk grew ever more on edge. Some locked their doors and hung spoons over the lintel. Others, mostly the oldest, began mumbling prayers from both the Bible and from the old stories, hoping to reach whatever spirits might be stirring. Jonah began sleeping with his maps spread all around him, dreaming increasingly of shadowed figures with luminous eyes digging at the mounds, clawing their way up toward the moon. White Owl, gazing into the fire, remembered his own grandmother warning that every time you stir their stones, something stirs awake. On the third night after the second poacher vanished, Sarah, alone late in her classroom, noticed a faint glow at the window. The lamp was low, but the field beyond shimmered strangely in moonlight. She watched, heart pounding, as a shape moved at the edge of the field, child-sized, but wrong somehow, the posture oddly fluid. The stride more a gliding than a walk. She followed, reckless and compelled. In the grove of dogwoods, she found not the girl, but another sign, a carving on a standing stone, weathered but readable in raking moonlight. Two crescents, set like eyes, above a maze of crossing lines. As she ran her palm over the cold surface, her own lantern flickered and guttered. And she heard, no, felt a whisper not quite sound. Like a breath inhaled just behind her ear. Sarah fled then, stone clutched hard in her hand. The next morning she found a message, no letters, but a pattern traced in fine white ash atop her desk. Two circles, and between them, a single elongated dark streak. A warning, an invitation. By week's end, the pressure on the sheriff mounted, 4 outsiders missing, 2 local children reporting dreams of moon-eyed figures wanting to come in from the cold, livestock mutilated but not eaten. The rumors thickened. Some said a family with moon eyes once lived at the county's edge. Others spoke darkly of the consequences of mixing blood with those best left underground. The gravest whispers, however, were reserved for what Sarah and Jonah now began to suspect, that the lost bloodline was not, perhaps, as lost as believed, and that the answers might lie buried not only in the ruined mounds, but in the living people of the Ozarks themselves. In gatherings small and secret, hands closed over lamps, elders warned, "Watch your children. Close the shutters. The ruins speak, and the moon is near full." As the days darkened, so did hope that the legend would subside once more to uneasy myth. Yet with every vanishing, every bloody sign, it seemed that something under the stone, some hunger, some memory or curse, was determined to rise to the surface once more. And just beyond the bounds of lantern light, luminous pupils blinked, patient and ancient. awaiting the night when the forest at last would speak their name aloud. Sirens of old fear wailed through the Ozarks in the wake of moonlit vanishings. Superstition festered and reason faltered as elders and parents alike began to see their neighbors, and sometimes their own kin, with new wariness. By the schoolhouse, Sarah Hobbs pored over notebooks, old court ledgers, and crumbling baptismal lists. She found, with mounting dread, a pattern written in the quiet records of centuries past. Her discoveries came piecemeal. A church register describing, in 1872, the unnatural lamplight of a wild boy found in a cornfield, whose mother sent him to kin up north, and no more was said. A county doctor's letter from 1864 described a strange albino lass with pupils so wide they filled the iris entire, taken in by a preacher's family, but lost to fever before a proper photograph could be made. Always the children appeared when some mound or ancient fortification was opened, then, after a winter or two, vanished, as if the forest reclaimed them. Sarah's sense of the rationale crumbled as she mapped the recurrences every time a mound was cut or its stones rearranged by loggers, prospectors, sometimes just curious farm boys. Strange children appeared within months. Not all made it into proper families, and at least one local ghost story, the Hightower Hollow Banshee, traced to bones found in 1889 beneath a fallen cairn. Driven from her desk by unease and by her own need to do something, Sarah sought White Owl again. This evening, his cabin was a fortress. The old man's stories shifted now, less history and more confession. Not so much teaching as warning. My grandmother told me, at the end of war, when Cherokee came to these hills, elders said some of their own carried strange blood. They would be friends tonight, not day. Her circle tended the stones and kept fires on mound tops when the autumn moon rose. Wardens, she called us, not neighbors but keepers, watchers against the night folk who saw by moon, who mourned the sun. When I was small, she marked us with smoke, with prayer, so the moon-eyed would pass by our door. He stared at Sarah, his clear gaze clouded by memory. But sometimes wardens forget. Sometimes hunger wakes older than warning. Sarah's heart shivered. Do you mean there are now descendants among us? White Owl shrugged, slow and sorrowful. Shadows cross blood. No one can say where one ends, one begins. But when mounds ruined, night things stirred. Days later, Jonah, grown ever more obsessed, visited Sarah in panic, babbling. I saw them in the old hollow by the west mound. Wide, shining eyes in the dark, their hands bloody from digging. They whisper, they want to see again. The child's back and not just her. They're more, just like the old stories. At first, Sarah dismissed Jonah's wildness, but she too started seeing things. Fleeting glimmers in windows, shapes vanishing behind trees. The neighbor's livestock restless and restless again. The town's dogs refused to enter certain clearings, and wide-eyed children wandered outside their own homes in sleep. Mumbling riddles or knocking gently on neighbors' doors. It worsened with the next waxing moon. On the third night, under a sky ghostly with thin cloud, Iris, if that was her name, for no other had ever been given, returned. Sarah was tending to her lamp in the schoolhouse, nearly alone. When she heard the distinct rustle of footsteps not meant for day, Iris appeared at the margin of the light, hair wild, eyes catching every glint. Skin whiter than moth wings in the yellow lamp glow. She did not blink. She pressed a hand, bloody but not broken, firmly against the old blackboard, leaving a print. At her feet, a scattering of crescent stones. Sarah, trembling, managed, Why come back? The girl did not answer at first. Then in a rustling whisper more sensed than heard, she said, When the ground is broken, those who cannot see the sun will wake. And the hungry ones will remember the fire. She placed a stone in Sarah's palm, a cold, moon-shaped token, then added, Some want home, some want revenge. Before Sarah could reply, Iris was gone, slipping out the door in a heartbeat, vanishing behind the elms as effortlessly as a shadow at sunrise. Sarah, staring at her own palm, felt the chill burrow to her bones. Jonah, fevered by his own encounters, stopped sleeping again. He haunted the ruined mounds, watching by lantern for eyes that watched him back. He spoke less now to anyone, except sometimes to rocks and shadows. One night he was found collapsed atop the west mound, muttering, "Let them see again. Buried secrets, buried forever. They want to see again." That same night, a local farmer lost 3 sheep, throats torn, bodies bloodless, but with no sound to warn. A family woke to find their youngest standing barefoot outside, eyes wide, humming an old tune not heard in any church. A hush settled over the town, the thick and feverish hush that always comes before a storm. White Owl found Sarah the next morning. It is not the first time. It will not be the last. The stories travel with blood. Names change, but fear returns. He pressed a little string of stones into her hand. "This is for seeing true. Leave these at the threshold, but keep your own eyes closed when moon is bright." Sarah, half mad with worry, pressed him. "Do you think they want to hurt us? Will they take children?" White Owl sighed, old pain in every word. "Some never mean harm. Loneliness is heavy, but some remember pain too well. And hunger. And some never forgive." Iris appeared once more, just before the next moon's fullest light, a flash of glimmer between pine trunks at the edge of the shaded glen. She left something more troubling than warnings or riddles. A tiny, sharp-edged carving in stone depicting 2 great, open eyes and the stylized maw of a mouth with pointed teeth beside a huddled figure. Man, child or beast, no one could tell. Sarah traced the curve of the stone, understanding beginning to dawn. It's a warning, or a story, or a threat. The old legend had always ended with this: the hungry ones remember the sun, remember being driven out and blinded, and those memories run in blood deep enough to wait 1,000 winters for revenge. That threat, or warning, or truth now haunted every trembling hush at midnight, every shadow flickering at the edge of the firelight. And as the community's nerves unwound, as children slipped sleepwalking, and neighbors wondered about kin long moved away or left out of family Bibles, the Ozarks' ancient secret pulsed nearer to the surface. Bloodline and curse, kin and fear, all interwoven with ancient stone and moonlight. The full moon hung low over the towering pines, its silver light casting elongated shadows that seemed to pulse with life. The 30 men and women gathered at the edge of Moonlight. Glenn did so not out of curiosity, but necessity. Another hunter, a seasoned woodsman named McCall, had vanished without a trace 2 nights prior, taken by the unseen hand of the forest that stirred something ancient and hungry. Sheriff Price, grim-faced and stoic, led the search party. By his side stood Jonah Larrabee, clutching his weathered notebook. White Owl, silent but watchful, and Sarah Hobbs, a thread of steel beneath her soft exterior, armed with data and determination. Each understood the stakes, the woods, the stones. The very air seemed alive with a watchful gaze. Their destination, the newly revealed entrance to the Moon-Eyed Caves, a narrow fissure at the base of the stonework mounds, half hidden behind brambles and a spill of granite boulders. Locals had long believed the caves were entrances to another world, portals best left unopened. Now the vanished hunters and cryptic signs left no room for doubt. The past had clawed itself back to the surface. As they entered, coldness gripped their bones, shadows deepened. The rocky walls bore carvings eerily similar to those etched near the schoolhouse. Circles within circles, crescents, eyes without pupils. An unspoken question hung in the air. Who or what had left these marks? And did the Moon-Eyed still dwell within? After hours of winding passages and echoing steps, the group stumbled upon a chamber, the heart of a forgotten fortress. Piles of bones lay strewn amid obsidian flakes and moonstones, a macabre testament to the clan's grim history. Flickers of movement darted just beyond torchlight, evading capture. Low growls echoed, quickening heartbeats. Suddenly from the shadows emerged figures, tall and lithe, pale as dusk. Their eyes, pale orbs shining with ghostly light, reflected the torches with unsettling awareness. Those weren't mere humans, but moon children, survivors or spirits poised between worlds. Some fled deeper into labyrinthine darkness. Others approached, silent but watchful. The party's breath caught as they glimpsed a figure in blue-gray mantle, the moon-eyed leader, always veiled, gender blurred, commanding in presence. The leader's hand gestured, a soft, wordless plea, or perhaps a warning. Here was the heart of the legend, beating still under stone and shadow. In the tense moments that followed, a struggle ensued, not all among the living. Spectral moans seeped from cracks in the rock. Shapes shifted between corporeal and ethereal. The party was forced back, chased by breathless whispers and a cold that bit deeper than mountain wind. Emerging at dawn, they sealed the caves with makeshift barriers and prayers whispered over reluctant stones. Yet as the first sun rays shattered night's grip, a single glowing eye vanished into the thicket, a seal broken, a gate now ajar. Back in town, whispers spoke of protective wards, ancient blessings to bind what was unleashed. Yet some knew the moon-eyed were not wholly malevolent. Some yearned for protection, for understanding, and for a forgotten home. Sarah, ever the seeker, held the crescent stone to her lips in quiet vigil, while Jonah vanished into the forest's embrace, leaving behind silent pages left unturned. And so the tale continued with new threads, of shadows that flicker near campfires, of children born with eyes too wide and sight tuned to moonlight, of secrets etched in stone and whispered through the pines. One thing was clear: the moon-eyed lineage, lost yet not gone, lingered in the heart of the Ozarks, waiting, watching, and perhaps one day reaching out. In the years that followed the sealing of the moon-eyed caves, the community of Pine Hollow grappled with a mixture of relief and restless dread. The ruins now stood silent but not asleep, the earth still murmuring beneath aged stones. While local residents carried unspoken fears in their eyes, Sarah Hobbs studied her journals and notes, connecting each whispered tale, vanished child, and mysterious stone into a tapestry thread where history, legend, and uncanny reality overlapped. She had come seeking rational explanations, but found herself confronting a truth far more unsettling: that the moon-eyed lineage was not merely a myth of a vanished people, but a living, breathing presence woven into the bloodlines of many who now called the Ozarks home. Among the townfolk, stories flourished about children born with unnaturally wide, pale eyes who avoided sunlight and murmured strange riddles in their sleep. Parents hushed these tales, unwilling to confront what might be true, that the moon-eyed bloodline persisted, hidden and adapting. Some argued these were simply genetic anomalies, albino descendants or children with congenital light sensitivity, but others whispered that these were the spectral heirs of an ancient curse. Called from shadow, Jonah Larrabee's obsession with the ruins deepened until one mist-choked dawn, he vanished without a trace. The search found only a single moonstone, warm to the touch, resting atop the west mound. Some believe he walked willingly into the forest's embrace, joining those who lurked beyond sight, protectors or prisoners of the moon-eyed legacy. Local families began to restrict children's play after dark, closing windows and shuttering homes during strong moons. Yet every year when the moon rounded full, stories of strange whistles echoed through the hollows, the call of the moon-eyed, summoning their own from the veils between worlds. Sarah remained at the schoolhouse, chronicling each new tale, each rumor of disappearances, and each eerie riddle left whispered near a hearth's dying ember. The crescent stone she'd kept came to symbolize a fragile link between past and future, between forgotten ancestors and the secret lineage that cast long shadows across the forest glades. The community, torn between guilt and pride, kept the secret closely held. To reveal it fully would be to invite fear, fanaticism, and worse, the attention of those who would seek to unravel the moon-eyed mystery for their own dark ends. As time unspooled like the vines trailing through the woods, the legend of the moon-eyed persisted, evolving both into a whispered curse and a wary pride in heritage. Some townsfolk came to believe the moon-eyed were guardians of the land's oldest magic, watchers in the twilight, who ensured that the mysteries of the stones and groves were never lost to time or the oblivion of progress. And so, under the waxing and waning moons that multiplied decades beyond 1903, the Lineage endured. Walkers with luminous, sightless eyes glimpsed in the gloam, murmuring riddles best never understood. Children born beneath secret moons, their iris wide to dreams older than memory, destined to carry the burden of a forgotten people's fading echoes. The curse remained. The blood remained, and the moon-eyed secret, woven into the very soil and souls of the Ozark Hills, waited silently for the next moonrise to awaken once more.